All right, everyone. I'm Rahul, as you know, and I'm a game director and the founder of Vertical Slice. Been in the game industry for about 2 decades now, and I'm really happy to have Antoine on my, call it podcast, YouTube channel today. Antoine is a game industry veteran. He's also a friend. I've known him for some time. He has worked on several great franchises like Rabbids, Assassin's Creed. Recently, he was the game design manager of Riot Games. So, Antoine, firstly, thanks a lot for agreeing to do this. And maybe you can let us know a little bit about your journey and in the game industry, how you got in, where you are at right now. You're doing a lot of exciting things with your own studio. So, maybe just run us through that.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity to share a bit more with the community, and I'm super happy to be with you and have that discussion together. So a bit about my journey. I started as a game designer in Ubisoft Paris, and this was in 2007, which was like an explosion in the game industry. We had like a new generation of consoles that just had arrived, the Xbox 360, the PS3, and most importantly, the Nintendo DS and Wii just arrived on the market. And so there was really like this boom of productions that were getting bigger, and Nintendo DS and Nintendo Wii that really opened up the market. And so in that context, I got very, very lucky because basically I was studying for a master's in game design, and many studios were in need of people that were trained because the teams were really expanding, right? And so someone from Ubisoft actually was part of the jury of my master's project, and he directly came to me after the presentation and said like, hey, would you like an opportunity to work at Ubisoft? And so I got very lucky in the sense that I never had to interview. It just like came to me and said like, hey, would you like to join us at Ubisoft? And I said, sure, absolutely. So that's how I started. I got very, very lucky that I didn't even have to interview. But once again, it was like a moment in the industry where finding people that were trained already was very difficult because there were very few schools and very few curriculum that would train you. And the teams needed to expand very fast. So that's how I got my first job. I got first to work on the Raving Rabbids franchise as a game designer, which was very fun because these games, if you remember, there are collections of mini games on the Wii. And so as a designer, it was a great opportunity because instead of starting my career and having to focus on like one big thing, I had the opportunity to try many different things, right, in the form of like many different mini games. And I feel like as a designer, it made me grow very fast because I had this opportunity to work on so many different game mechanics. And so it was great. And I released a couple of these over the years, like every year we were doing a new one. So I did a couple of these. There's one little thing here that I'm very proud of is that when we were working on Raving Rabbids TV Party, I had this idea for a game where you would dance. There was already like a music game, a rhythm game, but I wanted something where you can really dance and use the motion tracking capabilities of the Wiimote for that. And we did a mini game with this, and that mini game we thought had such a strong impact when we were showing it on like trade shows and things like this, that we really felt internally that we should push it and make it its own thing. And I contributed a little bit to this, which would eventually become the Just Dance franchise.
Awesome.
And it's a really cool story because it's really like it's a small idea and we do like a mini game inside of like a bigger collection of mini game, and we see how impactful this is. And then obviously not just me, but a couple of people in the team really believe in it, and we push it internally, and it became like kind of like a stealth production of sorts. It's like people believing in it, but like the top management not necessarily being fully understanding of what this was because it was so new. And then in the end, there are people in top management that did trust this and then let it happen, and this became Just Dance. So this fun little story of a side thing. Then after a few years of doing this, I had an opportunity to join the team for Watch Dogs, also at Ubisoft in Paris. So it was my first like gigantic sort of game. So Watch Dogs is a open world game where you play as a hacker in Chicago. And so it was also my first experience working with a different studio in collaboration. So the Montreal studio was lead on this, and we in Paris, along with a few other studios, I remember like Reflections in Newcastle worked on this as well. I think Bucharest. I don't remember all the studios, but it was my first experience, having to collaborate with different studios on different time zones, and that also that collaboration and how to coordinate all of this was like a very mind-broadening experience, as well as working on such a big, AAA open world game. Following this, I took the decision with my partner at the time to move to Singapore, and it just so happened that Ubisoft had an opportunity in their Singapore studio, so I moved through that, and I joined Skull and Bones. This was the very early days where Skull and Bones was still trying to find what game it needed to be, and I got very lucky to join this team early on and take the lead for the core gameplay team. So this was my first experience really leading the core gameplay of a game, as opposed to, as a designer contribute. And also a very big learning experience in terms of all of a sudden, while being in a leadership position, and not just working on my own mechanics as a designer, but kind of like helping set a vision, obviously we collaborating with the game director, and a couple other people. After a few years working on this project, I just needed a refresher, something a bit. And so I got an opportunity to move on to the Assassin's Creed team. And the experience there was also like very, very interesting because the Assassin's Creed team at that point at the Ubisoft Singapore studio had a very, very strong content team, and they were creating content for the game, but it didn't have a feature team anymore. The studio had worked on feature before, and then the feature team moved on to go to Skull and Bones, and so I went to Assassin's Creed to recreate a feature team with Joseph Tan, my lead programmer, and a few other people. And we worked together on rebuilding from scratch a team. And that was also like a very, very interesting experience. So by then, I had moved on to be a associate game director. And so same thing, like I was in charge of like setting a vision, but also building a team to serve that vision together and learn to work together and then find a way to build the team, which was like such a great and formative experience as a leader. I really, really loved that experience. And then after this, I went back to Skull and Bones to help for a little bit, but I felt like I just wanted to discover something new. And so I got an opportunity to join Riot Games in Singapore. And there I was in charge of the design department. And so it was, once again, I guess, like one step above in the sense that I was managing design for the entire studio and the Hong Kong studio as well, for every project that the studio worked on. So I got a chance to oversee things that we're working on for League of Legends, for Valorant, for Teamfight Tactics, a little bit of 2XKO, the upcoming fighting game, and a few other projects that are not announced yet. So once again, as a leader. It was a very different way of looking at things because it's a very different perspective, a higher perspective, but it's also about empowering people on each of these projects. And so, yeah, so it was a very good experience. And following this, I decided to start my own thing. So now we are today, and I have my own studio with a few friends of mine, and then we partner together to create something that I think is very, very original and hopefully, something that people will resonate with. But I think we do bring a lot of creativity and originality. Can't wait to unleash this, but of course, it's going to take a few more years to cook it first. So yeah, so that's basically my journey.
Yeah, awesome. I think, Antoine, so if you can tell the listeners what's the name of your studio and what's your big vision, and what motivates you after so many years, especially in being in the AAA space, right, to go and do something like this? Because I haven't spoken to a single game designer in my life who doesn't want to do this, It's very hard to find one. Like, we all want to do this, right, at some stage. So, yeah, what's your vision? What's the name of the studio?
Yeah, so in terms of the name of the studio, we're not quite ready to reveal it to the world because we are in discussions with like different partners and everything. But what I can say is that like our vision is really to bring something fresh, both for linear media and interactive media, and we are seeing a lot of these days, right? Whether it's games that now get adapted into linear media, whether it's movies and series, especially series these days, is like it's really something that starts to be a trend in the sense that now we've reached a maturity where IPs that are created for games are mature enough and people doing linear content understand it enough that they can create good content, which has not been the case for many years. And so we are seeing this, but we want to push it to the next level. There's a lot of technology out there that allows you to create linear media and interactive media kind of like in parallel and at the same time. And we want to leverage this to inject more interactivity and be more in connection with our audience and our community.
All right. I think you have shared, the big idea with me in the past. It's really exciting, not done before. And what you say about is so true. Like back in the day, when we work on IPs and games, the IP would come from films or some sports franchise, whether it's FIFA or some movie. And games used to have a reputation of, especially when it comes to movie-based IPs, to be kind of the bastardized version of that movie-based IP, right? Which is not well done. In fact, if you get a good game out of a movie-based IP, it would be like a surprise. But what we are seeing now is with The Last of Us, Minecraft, Mario, I think the sensibilities are changing, and I think games have really gone mainstream, and it's very exciting for all of us, especially people who have. Sorry, there's some sound. Especially people who have been in the back end for so many years, because working with IPs, it can be a big hit or it can be just something like, oh, just take this, put it somewhere, right? Coming to a question, right? A lot of designers I know who are junior to maybe even senior, someday they want to be leads, someday they want to be directors, right? And the truth of the matter is not everyone makes it. It's a very competitive field. There are a lot of people in the field. I think the difference between someone like me and you entering the industry, almost like, couple of decades before, whatever, from now is the competition. It's very stiff because there's so many trained people getting into the industry. What are some things you would notice in, let's say, a senior designer if you have to promote them to a lead? What are things you would look out for as a game industry veteran, both in terms of soft and hard skills?
Right. I think like the big difference when you start to have leadership responsibilities is the fact that you're becoming also a manager. And this is something that, unfortunately, in the industry, I've seen a lot of people that were excellent designers and people that show the potential for maybe, forming a higher level vision. And so you would think, hey, there's maybe potential for leadership there. And then basically completely crumble under the pressure of, hey, you also have to manage people. Like that's what it is. And I think now with a bit more experience, what I'm looking for is like these signals of how much of a manager, I see in you, and also giving the keys to help people learn how to be a manager. And when I say being a manager, it means having now a focus on how do I give a space for people to be the best they can be. How can I set up people for success? How can I help people grow? And so I think a good lead is someone that is both an expert in their field, but also someone who is a mentor and someone who is a guide, right? That's how I define a lead. And so really, it's like taking that step for any designer that has aspiration to go there. It's obviously like continue to hone your craft. It's very important to still be in touch with the craft and understand very well the craft, especially because you need to mentor. But it's also understanding that you're becoming a manager. You're going to have to help people that you manage do their job, being the best they can be. And so giving them that support, giving them that space, and giving them that clarity of how their job contributes to something a bit bigger. And I do think it's a different set of skills. It's very different from design skills. Design skills are very much problem solving, right? It's like the main skill. Of course, there's a lot of skills. There's communication with the rest of the team. But it's a lot of problem solving. And when you get to a lead position, all of a sudden, it's a lot more about soft skills. People management is understanding people. It's about, once again, setting them up for success. And that means you need to understand where they are, what is needed for the project, and how they can get there, right? How they can bring this, and making sure that you create that space for them to be able to deliver what they need to deliver and be the best they can be and express themselves. So in a sense, there is this transition, and I'll admit it was hard for me when I first did it. So it's like, it was back in 2014 that I got my first lead position. And I was still very much, loving game design as a craft. And so there's a lot of problems that I felt I wanted to work on and I wanted to solve just because I love doing it, right? It's just not thinking that I was going to be like, oh, I can do it better than, my designer or whatever. That's not that. It's just I love doing it. So I stay attached to the craft, and I stay attached to, okay, this problem, I have an idea of how I could solve it. This problem, I know what I would want to do with it, and I, would want to work on it. And taking that step back to say, as a lead, this is not my role anymore, right? My role is to set the goal. Hey, what is the goal of this mechanic? What does it achieve? And this set of mechanics, how do they fit within the bigger vision set by the game director, the creative director? So my role is to like set the goal, the design goals, and how that fits, and set basically the team on the right path, and make sure that they understand where we are going, right? It's like what the target is. And then, again, as I said, is like provide them with the space so that they can solve the problem, right? In the best way that they can. And so that mindset shift For me, it was a bit difficult, and I think it's something that I would recommend anyone that has aspiration to become a lead to start to think about it. Hey, first asking the question, and I've had that like a couple of years back actually. Someone who was when I was at Ubisoft, someone who said, "Hey, I think I'm interested in like a lead position," and what I said is, "Okay, let's." But he was like, "I think," and I could feel that he wasn't like fully sure. And I said, "You know what? Let's take 6 months, and during these 6 months, I'm going to give you a bit of space and some responsibilities in terms of." Exactly what I said, right? Setting the goals. The timing was working right just for a junior designer, and I said, okay, I'll give you one junior designer as a report, right? So just one. We do it for 6 months. I give you an extra couple of responsibilities when it comes to deciding the goals and everything, and we'll obviously follow this together, and I'll help you and support you. And after 6 months, he realized, oh, actually, I would have, preferred to do this myself, and the whole having to manage someone and help them and all is like I realize it's not something that I appreciate so much in the end, and so in the end he realized that he would much rather take on bigger design problems, and that's how he would prefer to develop his influence and his aura, I guess,
More
within
like
the
an
project.
individual contributor, right?
Exactly. And so he realized that, oh, actually, I thought I was interested in being a lead, but I realized I'm more interested in going on a path to become an expert, right? So for him, being a lead was more like, oh, I'm taking bigger responsibilities in terms of the game itself. And if you want to do that, what you really want to do is become an expert.
Yeah.
So an individual contributor, not necessarily like a team leader.
Yeah, it's very interesting what he said there because, I know people who are amazingly good at individual contribution and there's a path for them, right? They become like the principal architect or principal game designer, and they are normally your go-to person, when shit hits the fan because they are just so specialized in that craft and they are so good. But when it comes to lead, it's a lot of it is about people. In fact, I think for anyone who aspires to be a lead or a director, you really have to understand how many times you'll be sitting with different groups of people in the office at different times of the day, and the things you'll really love doing, like going and researching on a game, writing a game design documentation, building a system design manual, or even
Yep.
prototyping something, those will start shrinking because people are coming to you for direction. And I struggled with that too. Like, I became a lead around 2016, and I remember on my second week, it felt like the entire office was looking for me for one thing or the other. And,
Yeah.
and you're thrown into these problems, especially as a new lead, right? You're trying to prove yourself. So you're thrown into these problems, and some of them are simple and some of them are a little more complex. They require a little more communication, right? And I think it's really a learning process. So, in fact, what I try to do is very similar to you two, where I had a reportee in the last couple of years at LAI who really wants to be a lead someday. And what I did was I started giving him an intern to manage, and I would just give him an overall larger direction and then see how he would work with an intern. But what I also started doing with him was I started holding back some information to see how he comes up with solutions, instead of just like spoon feeding him and telling him that, hey, try it this way, even if sometimes I knew maybe it's the wrong path to go, because I feel that's where the growth would happen, where you can see that, oh, I made this mistake, how do I go around it? And in 1 year's time, he was a completely different person. When I met him, when he first told me this, he was very impulsive. He was like, someone who would jump to conclusions, be very reactive in his design. And 1 year later, he would listen to feedback and he would kind of analyze it in his own head. He could articulate things, and it's very interesting to see people grow through that journey. One thing, of course, as you become a lead and director, right? And this is something we touched upon, I think, when we were having coffee. You're not just managing your team and giving them the direction, you're managing a lot of stakeholders and their
Yes.
expectations too. And these sometimes can collide. How do you handle that? How do you go from, yes, this game or this thing we are making needs to make money, needs to come out in the market at a certain time and date, but at the same time you have this huge passionate group of people who want to keep polishing it, who want to better that. How do you deal with that? Because I've seen people who go either ways, and then somewhere like that becomes a very, how do I say, a very combustible situation.
Yeah, it's it can be quite difficult. And one thing that I'll say, because now that I have my own studio, I have people tell me like, "Oh, now you're your own boss. You're master of your destiny." Is well, the thing is like, unfortunately, none of us, the co-founders, are millionaires. So of course we need money, and so now you have investors, and it's the same thing, right? So it's like you always have to answer to someone, even if you have your own business. And so in the end, you're very right. It's like it's something that you have to manage no matter what, especially when you get to like a director level where you're really talking to like high stakes stakeholders, and of course like the team. Like, I think the thing that is most important is making sure that everyone has a common goal, right? You can have different perspectives on it, but at least everyone needs to see a common goal. It can start to be like very difficult and add a lot of friction if you're thinking in terms of, oh, these are like the goals of the stakeholders, the top management, whoever it is, and within the team, that's what we want to do, and you treat this as if it was two different things, because then you become like that person in the middle that either becomes like a shield, or I want to make sure that I protect my team from whatever comes from above, or you're doing the other way around, which is usually more a filter of like, oh, the team wants to do things, but there's no way the stakeholders can know, so I'm going to filter. And when you start to go into this dynamic, it can become very stressful and very difficult, and also it can become toxic if you don't manage this well. And so I feel like having this clear goal, and one of the easy ways that we were doing this at Riot is that Riot is a company where the entire company is fully focused on the players, right? And it's every project, even the esport side of the business, everything is like everyone is super focused on like players. And with this, you're having discussion with stakeholders, and of course, these discussions involve budgets and timelines and everything. But you can always bring back what's in it for players, right? It's like, and from a player's perspective, why are we doing this and all of this? And then when you talk to the team, and of course, like with the team, everyone needs to take into account the constraints, but people are more thinking in terms of like, hey, what's the experience like, and what do we want to do, and everything. You can always also boil this down to, how is this contributing to the player experience, and how are the players going to appreciate this, and how is it aligned with what our players expect from us? And if you do this, then you get a much more healthy sort of like alignment, and it's less about trying to fight on one side or the other. It's more being a facilitator and building a bridge, right? It's like, hey, we have these high-level stakes that we need to respect, but that's in the end, like the high-level goal is still what can we do for players, and what's the timeline that makes sense in terms of production, but that fits also something that would be good for players in terms of timing, in terms of quality. And if we do have to make compromises on one end or the other, because we always have to, right? It's like, hey, sorry guys, I know you're very passionate about this thing, but it's not going to fit with like the budget that we have or the timeline that we have. And you can always have these discussions as a director, going to your stakeholders and saying, hey, I understand the constraints and everything, but I need to tell you, in terms of compromise we need to do, that's what we will need to do. But from a player's perspective, we think it's the best compromise because, that, and you can explain your rationale from a player's perspective, and you can talk to the team and say the same thing. Hey guys, I know you're super passionate about like this, particular part of the feature or everything. Unfortunately, we will have to compromise. But we made the rationale to say, hey, from a player's perspective, we think that it's acceptable because of this and that. And to me, it's something that I want to continue using, that it clicked with me when I was at Riot, that this is a very good way to become that bridge, right, between one side and the other, and balance both and have everyone understand it. And the key for this, and it's something that I think is so important, is the transparency.
Yeah.
And I say this because I've made that mistake before. I've made that mistake of becoming a shield and a filter, right? Of I'm going to protect my team from, like the stakeholders and their pressure, and I'm going to, tank it for them to be free of that. And then the other way is like I'm going to filter up what the team says and what they want to do, so that it doesn't stir up the stakeholders too much. And when you do this, as I said, like it's a recipe for tension, and now all of a sudden it feels more like a confrontation where it should be a collaboration, right? And so the key to this, in my opinion, is transparency. Is if there are things that come from the high-level stakeholders that even are challenging, right, are difficult, and maybe will take time to process and see how we can find solutions, I'm not going to hide it from the team, because they're all, intelligent adults, and we can all find a solution together, and they can understand also the context within which they work, right? And it's, of course, I'm going to not put all that burden on their shoulder, but I'm going to let them know that this is what happens. And same the other way, right? It's like I'm going to tell my stakeholders, hey, like within the team, this is what people think, and this is how they think they can address this. And you may or may not have the same idea of how to address it, but at least I want to let you know how the team thinks. And then we can always realign, because now we are like, okay, both sides understand what's going on. And we have this common goal of, in the end, it's for players. So let's just like find that sweet spot where we still hit something that is for players. So it's not about, that's the thing, right? It's like, as a director, it's not about what I think, it's about what's best for the players. I think as a game director, it is so important to be like, I'm not doing my dream game, I'm doing a bold vision that I think a lot of people are going to enjoy.
Yeah, I think something that I remember when, in the last couple of years, there was a game I was directing. It's not released yet, but it's quite amazing, with the team. And I think it's doing really well on some of the tests we have done. But I think midway through that game, where we were like maybe 6-7 months from sending it to actual tests, there was a stakeholder who had a very strong opinion on adding a feature, which would be very hard with 6 months remaining. And I constantly pushed back against this feature, but I think where I came from was, I'm not pushing back this feature because you're a stakeholder and it's 6 months. I'm pushing back this feature because it's not good for the game. It's not good for the players, And I tried to understand from a stakeholder's perspective where he was coming from when he wanted that feature. And it came down to the fact that, other games have it, that's why we need to have it too, which to me is not a valid, player-based kind of look, because, we were actually specifically designing it not to be like other games. Well, long story short, when this game went out for testing, we did not put the feature in, and it was really a big success, and players loved the fact that we didn't put that feature in, because the idea was that, how are we going to get parents and kids to play this game together? And I really felt like if we add this feature in, it's going to cater to one kind of audience over the other. So I think holding your ground is also very important, but it has to come from like what you said, it has to come from a perspective. Am I doing it because of my ego? And I think that I'm the director, that's why no one can question me. In fact, I think a good environment would be where almost everyone can give you ideas and give you like, hey, I think this, because ultimately the player will decide whether it works or not, right? And
Yep.
where I feel a lot of younger designers, maybe you can give me a thought on this, sometimes find it very challenging is they fall into this scope of reactive design. Like you have put in all this effort with your team, right? And you're presenting to your stakeholders. And your stakeholders, like any other humans, they'll give you a lot of feedback during that presentation window that you have. And what I've seen a mistake that younger creatives or even creative directors who are not really experienced, who have been promoted very quickly, they tend to do is they take all of that feedback as the gospel truth, and they kind of forget what the core of the gameplay is and what that goal they are moving towards. And immediately that feedback goes into Jira, and now it becomes a task. So yeah, how do you grow into that mentality that no, this is a feedback session, and it's not like we have to take all of this. The product manager goes and puts it into Jira, and now gradually you're having a different game.
Yeah, I totally see what you mean, and I think it boils down to a vision and understanding the vision. As you grow in a leadership position, something we didn't talk about is, yes, there's something about craft and mentoring and managing people, but there's also something about more and more as you go up in responsibilities, you are responsible and you are the holder of the vision, right? And so what I call the vision is basically what is the goal? It doesn't mean you know exactly what the end product is going to be, but you know where we're going, right? It's like that's why it's called director, right? It's like there is a direction, and understanding, forming a clear direction, a clear vision, something where you're like, these are the key elements that we want in the experience, right? We want the experience to be like this. Because you have like a certain target audience, because there can be many reasons that inform this, but in the end is having that clarity of that's in the end the experience we want to achieve. We don't know how to get there, that's part of the work to figure it out, but we know where we want to get in terms of the experience. And so when you have this, use this as a filter, and that's something that actually I used when I was mentoring designers to become leads, and I've done that a couple of times, is really whenever you get feedback, every single piece of feedback you get is important, but it's as important to use that vision, that direction as a filter, as a way to say every piece of feedback is good. Not every piece of feedback is exactly adapted to the vision. It's good in the sense that you need to take it in. Yeah. You should not reject feedback, but when you get the feedback, it's your role actually as as a leader, especially as a director, to say that makes sense within the vision, and I see how we can use that to improve, and that I understand where you're coming from, but where we are going, like that goal that we have, it's not going in that direction.
Yeah. I think one of the things is also like isolating that feedback from that person. Like sometimes you can have like feedback from multiple person, and you can go like, oh, Antoine said this, Rahul said this, and you might have a personal relationship, with that person, which may be good or bad. So instead of looking at that feedback, you're looking at that person,
Yes.
I think what is really important is isolate that feedback from the person. More like, okay, it comes from this person, whatever, that's irrelevant. Does that feedback help the game? If it helps the game, and even if I don't get along with that person, like there are many times I was like, oh, this is a great feedback, let's put it in. If it doesn't help the game, I mean, there are a lot of times internal teams, they come up with feedback which is completely contradictory to where you're trying to go. And I think like what you said, as a director, it's your role really to filter that.
Yeah, and actually part of the role is, as a director, you are the holder of the vision. You're the person who is there to make sure that within a team, and when a team gets very big, it can get very challenging. Within the team, everyone understands where we are going, right? Again, like it's about direction, it's about goals. And you were saying like, as you got in your first lead position, you were like, a lot of people were coming to ask you questions and everything. Is actually when you're a director, I would say like 80% of your job is communication. It's making sure that the team understands where we're going. It's making sure that every single team member understands how their contribution fits within the bigger vision and the experience overall. And so yeah, it's a lot of this, and that includes actually stakeholders, I believe.
Yeah.
Right? It's stakeholders, of course, they come with usually it's either like budget constraints, and maybe is there can be like a target audience also that they want to address, and as part of like the portfolio of the company, and it's like there can be a number of constraints. But from this, you shape a vision for, hey, that's the experience that we want, and you're also responsible for making them understand, your high level stakeholders, hey, this is how I'm answering, these constraints that you're giving, right? So like that's the vision of how we are going to create a product that is going to resonate with people, within the constraint that you gave me. And same for the team, like, hey, this is what we are trying to achieve. So this is how what you're doing makes sense within that whole. And so there's so much discussion that's going on, and it's a lot of, it can take many forms, of course, right? It can take the form of a few key documents. It can be like some presentations that you give, but I think there's a lot also of being available for people. And just like, okay, you need to, you have a few questions, you want to understand this a bit more so that you can do your job better. It's like, yes, as a director, it is my job to be available for you and give you these answers.
I mean, this is so important. What I do a lot is I actually block out my calendars from a lot of meetings where I feel like my contribution is not really needed. So let's say if it's an administrative meeting, if it's some, meeting where it will just be discussed, like what are the office supplies and, what I generally block myself out of it, and it confuses people because it may seem like I'm isolating myself, because I'm blocking that time for my team who's going to come to me and, which I feel is the main priority, right? It doesn't help the organization that I'm in a 1 hour meeting where, we are discussing about office parties. Like once in a while, it's fun. Or we are discussing about, roadmaps and things like that, which are not related to like the next 2-3 years. Maybe roadmaps of like, career progression in the organization. I mean, you're the HR, you can handle it. What I've learned as a director is you have to be a bit stingy with your time, otherwise you'll just be too spread out and you won't know where to focus on. And as humans, we can only focus on so many things at a time. I've seen directors try to please everyone, try to do everything. And the problem with those projects is they end up losing a voice, They don't have a strong voice in that. And I think, again, isolating your time and understanding who needs it the most is really important. One tough question, which I'm sure all of us have faced as leads, as directors, is at the end of the day, we try to help our team out, we try to do the best by people. But sometimes you also work with people who might not be the best for the role, and you have given them chances, opportunities, or who may be very difficult to work with. What's your approach in dealing with such kind of people? Because I have dealt with, younger programmers, younger designers, who after a point of time, they become very difficult, and you have to kind of figure out, hey, do I continue investing my energy with them, or do I need to cut my losses because it's affecting the team at this point of time? How would you approach someone who's being difficult or who's just not delivering work at a standard or quality you want them to?
Yeah, I think these are two different type of profiles, and you have the profile of like, this person is being difficult, doesn't, gel with the team. And then there's like, this person might be like very well integrated in the team and all, but just like the output of work doesn't really reach the bar that we need. And I think these are two different types of like profiles. For people that are being difficult, I will always invest time, one-on-one. And as I said, it's like, I value transparency a lot, so I'm going to tell it like it is. It's like, hey, you're creating friction in the team, and we need to find a solution because it's affecting the whole team. Right? And I'm going to be like very straightforward in that sense. And we are going to work together on, okay, trying to understand why are you like this. Like my assumption is always like, no one is being difficult for the sake of it. Right? People are being difficult because they have frustrations. People are difficult because there might be ways in which they cannot do their job the way they want, and so they build resentment, or some things are not being talked about, and so people misinterpret other people's intentions, and once again like they build up like a sort of like a negative sentiment, and so I'm always trying as much as I can to help that person within the time that I can spend doing that, but I'm always trying to understand, okay, what's the underlying problem, and can we work on this, and are you willing to work on this? Now, there's two things. Someone who is not willing to work on their attitude, their relationship with the team and everything, honestly, I'm not going to be very patient. It's like you can't help people in spite of them. So it's like, if you're not willing to work on this, then the way I'm going to handle this is I'm going to, again, be very straightforward is, hey, we are going to bring that discussion to HR and maybe like find a different team. If, the company allows for it, let's find a different team where you might not have these problems. And then if not, it's never happened to me, but, I would be ready to go to, hey, it's just not working out, and, go to that point. But I'm always going to start with being very upfront with the person. You're creating friction right now, and so let's work on it. Let's find what's the reason for it, and then so that's one side. Then when it's more like an output problem, then same thing. I like transparency, so I'm going to start with, hey, performance-wise, you're not delivering the way we need you to deliver. You're not hitting these quality bars, or you're not delivering maybe like on time the way we need you to for the planning and everything. And then same thing is like put in place a sort of a program of support of, hey, we need you to get your skill up to the level that we expect. And so let's look at, the next 3 to 6 months. What do you think you need to have this? And I can help you identify this, right? Hey, I can see that your written communication is really not clear enough. People are not understanding your design documents. It's creating a lot of friction, a lot of a lot of extra work from people to understand what you're trying to say and everything. I'm taking that example because I've had that one example before of someone who just didn't have like very good written skills, and the documents were never clear enough, and that created a lot of delay in the work of the team. So, hey, we identify is this. Let's pair you up with a designer that is better and have like a review system for your documents. So again, like try to give that person that sort of chance to really step up and ramp up the skills. And it happened to me once where a team member, after a 6 months period of, like a performance improvement program at school, right? Yeah. Many companies call it performance improvement program, PIP. So we went through this, and unfortunately, that team member just did not manage to step up to that bar. And so, unfortunately, after 6 months, of course, we had that discussion of, not after 6 months, but throughout the 6 months, we're having that discussion of like, hey, we're not seeing you ramp up at the pace that we need you to. And really, it's, we are going to continue supporting you, but you need to know that you're not there, right? You're not improving as fast as we need you to. And then, unfortunately, it reached a point where, as you said, it's not so much about like cutting your losses as it is like a realization, a common realization that you're just not the right person for this job, right? It's like, hey, we've tried to help you. You've had 6 months. You're still not hitting the bar. We've tried to help you, but you can see yourself that performance-wise, you're not there. And then, so it happened to me once, but I've had to let someone go because they were just not hitting it. But I would never, I think as as a director, as a manager, it's important to let people know at a time where they can still improve. I think what would be a very bad move as a director, as a manager, is to see that like this person is not hitting the quality bar that I need and not let them know directly. And then it comes as a surprise, like, oh, you get to
Yeah.
performance review, and it's like, I'm so sorry. Now there is performance review. I'm looking back at the past 6 months. You were not hitting the bar, so we cannot keep you. That I think is it's bad because I've had actually much more examples of people realizing that okay, I need to amp up my skill on this or that, and then do step up to
Yeah.
that. Right? And more often than not, given like the right support framework, you see people really starting to be very high performers.
Yeah.
Uh, so you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not letting people know because you're basically missing out on the potential of someone stepping up and maybe even uh, exceeding your expectation later.
Yeah, I think game direction, again, the managing part and the human emotions part of it is so important. It's a thin line, right? I think one of the mistakes you can make as a director or lead is keep everything very cushy all the time, even if you know that there's a problem. So let's say if you are very worried about how a person would take a feedback, and of course it has to be constructed professionally. But if you are worried that, hey, my junior is not going to like the fact that I'm going to tell them to improve, or I'm going to tell them that they should not be, sleeping off in a meeting, things that those things happen, in the
Yeah,
industry, right? It seems like a small thing. Or when I call all my team to a stakeholder meeting, stakeholders are looking at each one of you, and you might be amazing at your work, but in that meeting, if you're dozing off, if your body languages, you're disinterested, it sends a message to that stakeholder, right? And I think sometimes having those difficult conversations early on, constructed, of course, well, is really important. And the same thing with skills, because I always feel like the challenge is that if you have someone in your team who's continuously not performing well, people still might be friends, and cordial, but what starts happening is his or her work starts expanding to that team, and others start feeling that weight of the work. Like I've had to work with a programmer in the past who's a very nice person. He even offered me some gift cards when I was going abroad. And I really was like, I like him as a person, but a very weak performer, and was just dragging that entire project down to the point where I had to hire someone else. And the difference between the person I hired and this person was day and night, right? And it becomes a difficult conversation because, you want the team to be performing at a certain level. And I think a lot of people have this idea about direction that it's strawberries and roses, and you're the director and you have this high profile job. But I think the managing of people at different levels is really something that you have to be good at. uh, about hard skills, right? Something we spoke about previously, and I think you really enjoyed this in the last year, where you went back to getting your hands dirty on game engines, on motion capture, things like that. One of the things that I really enjoy is getting my hands dirty too. And the challenge with game direction is, like you said, you're so busy, everyone is coming to you, you're exhausted at the end of the day, there are days where I used to try to kind of look at tutorials or just do hobby projects, and they would just not add up till the point where I kind of devise some kind of a system. How important it is to keep some level of hard skills in your craft, even when you're a director, because my worry always has been that if I'm a pure manager, at some point I'll become obsolete. I won't be able to, see the trends, and you might lose the respect on the floor. Or there might also be a scenario where there are so many tools being used in design, programming, art, right? And I always feel it helps. You don't need to be perfect in those tools, but if you at least understand those tools, you get that, kind of respect from people on the floor. So how important is balancing that hard skill with a managerial role, which in itself is very time consuming?
Yes, I personally think that it's absolutely crucial. I think if you, I think leadership is about getting showing the example and being that person that people want to follow, right? Not because they have to, but
Yeah.
because you're inspiring. I think you cannot do that if you become a professional manager and you've lost touch with. When I say professional manager, is like someone who is only managing and has lost touch with the craft. I think it's very difficult to be inspiring when the moment discussions get a bit more in the weeds, you're unable to follow up with the discussion because you've lost touch with exactly what it is
Yeah. And the
to
team
do the
will
thing.
know. They might not say it, but they'll
Oh yeah,
feel it. Yeah.
of course. And it's also it's two things, right? Is in terms of team management, as you said, it's about the respect. It's about being inspiring to people, but it's also about being relevant. In we were talking about vision and everything. Is like if you've lost touch, especially with the craft of game design as a game director, then then I feel it's more difficult to stay relevant in your vision and what you want to do. So I think it's absolutely crucial. It is the hardest thing to do, and I don't think I can say I've managed to strike the right balance yet. And I've been doing this for many years now. And it's always a struggle to find that balance. One thing that I like to do for myself now, and it's been a couple of years. I think it's when I moved to Assassin's Creed is really when I started to actively do this. Is I'm always trying to carve myself a little bit of time and a little space on the project where I'm still doing things, right? And when I say doing things, it's like I really mean I'm taking like a little design, a little piece of mechanic and everything, and I'm putting some time in my calendar for this, and I'm designing it, and I'm hands-on implementing it for the parts that I can do, and this is my way of staying very connected to like that's how you do things. And I was doing that even when I was the manager for the game design department at Riot. My responsibilities was like managing a bunch of designers that were each on different projects. So I had to oversee some things going on Teamfight Tactics at the same time as some things going on Valorant at the same time as some things going on 2XKO. It's like all of this in parallel. So it's like it can become very easy to be like so high level and disconnected. But the team was working on a game mode for an event for Teamfight Tactics. Well, I set some time and I saved myself some time to go in on this and support my designer with some actual design work. And I went into the engine and I scripted some of this. Right.
Nice.
And it was like a little bit of it. And I was doing like my scripting in the morning, and the afternoon we would be working on like a different thing on Valorant. And it's so I had to switch my brain to something completely different. But at least I had this thing where I stay connected, so I still understand, how it's done and what the craft is like and what the constraints are with the tools. And because it's that as well, right? It's like the more, the higher level of responsibility you get, the more as a game director, you're talking about game vision, player experience, these things that are very high level. And sometimes you have like some of your reports in the team, well, their reality day to day is, yeah, sure, I understand the vision and here's like, my theoretical design and all, but I'm struggling with the tools, I'm struggling with and if you've lost touch with this, then how can you understand and help that report, right? So I feel it's so important to stay in touch. And yeah, it's something that I've really tried to do for a very long time now, to always carve that time in the week for me to be hands-on and find a little bit of scope. And of course, I limit the scope of what I do personally to something that is safe and small, because of course I don't want to jeopardize the project just because like, it's my project. I want to do this thing. And now, I'm jeopardizing the project because I have other responsibilities. So I'm always trying to be mindful of this, but I try to do that. And as I said, it's like finding that balance is very difficult. It's like there are times where I really cannot find the time, and so for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, I'm not going to have that hands-on sort of part just because I cannot make it work. And other times where I'm getting so interested in this because I still love the craft. I love game design and I love designing things still very much. And so I get too deep on this, and now it's taking like a full day or even a day and a half out of my week, and I need it for high level things as well. And so yeah, it's finding where to place that cursor. I'm still struggling, and it's still uh, something that I'm trying to find. I guess like for every project, it's different. For every team, it's different. But I do think it's crucial. I don't think you can be a director and not keep, that line with the reality of the job.
No, I think it's really important that, as a director, I always feel it's a bit like movie direction, right? Like when you're on a set, you don't need to know how the camera operates, but if you can communicate with the DOP on a focal length, on the kind of camera
Yes.
you look, if you can give him or her storyboards or mood boards, just to show your vision. Because so much of a director's work is like, this is what I have, this is what we think we can do. Maybe I can script something very small. I know I'm not the game programmer, I'm not the best gameplay programmer, but I can show you a gym or, a basic prototype. You are the expert. And I've noticed a lot of times the experts will take that then as a really strong reference and bring it to another level, And I think
Yeah.
that really helps the collaborative workflow.
Your part of it is really what you were saying. It's about also knowing how to talk to people, right?
Yeah.
What's their reality
Yeah.
helps you communicate with them.
Yeah. I think it would be a lost opportunity, Antoine, if I don't ask you about your linguistic skills. You have written fictional language for games. It's an incredibly interesting topic. You don't find a lot of people who can do that. A little bit about how you got into it, what your thought process is when you take up a new project. How do you create something out of nothing?
Sure. So like the story of how I got into creating languages is I was on a holiday in St. Petersburg in Russia visiting a friend. That was in, well, I don't remember, like 2010, 2011, around there. And I was I've always been interested in languages, just something that interests me. And for the flight back, I was looking for something that I could read on the plane on the Russian language.
Okay.
After being there for a couple of weeks and learning like a few phrases and all, I was interested to learn more about the language itself. And so I was just like looking for something to read on the flight, and completely by chance, even though I was looking like books on Russian, I found a book called the Language Construction Kit. I was like, oh, what is this about? Okay, it piqued my curiosity. So I took it and I started to read it on the plane. And so it's a book that was written as basically it's a very simplified linguistics manual that was written by someone who creates languages as a way to flesh out a world for books that is writing. Right. So very much like Tolkien, right, has done for Lord of the Rings, very famously. He created Middle Earth and all these stories as a way to give life to languages that he was creating as a linguist, because that's what he was, right? And so anyways, it's like I start to read this book and I'm like, oh, this is so interesting. I'm just going to play with this and, work a bit on this. So it became a hobby, basically. As a hobby, I was like, oh, these are interesting languages in the real world. How can I mash up different features? What do they have culturally in common? How do they represent through words different aspects of the culture? And I was, just like making up some things for like fictional cultures that I had in my head and see how in the real world it works this way. How can I make it work in a way that's a bit different, a bit interesting? Anyways, it was a hobby. I was doing that for a while. And then it came to a point where I had done like a couple fictional languages on my own as a hobby. And I think was it in 2014 or 15? But basically the first couple of years of Skull and Bones, I was having a discussion with the narrative director back then, Kurt McClung. And so I told him about like this hobby that I have and everything. And at that point in the very troubled history of Skull and Bones, the game had a fantastical setting, right? So it was not like the game that was released has some fantastic elements with like sea monsters, but the setting is a bit more grounded. It was much more fantasy back then than what it was. And it was not like the game that got released is the Indian Ocean, but in a way that's slightly fictionalized. But there is still like a lot of real world grounding. Like back then, it was like a fully fantasy world, like nothing to do with the real world. And so there's like a bunch of civilization that we created for it, everything. And so there was this idea of, hey, it's like you're telling me about this hobby that you have. Don't you think it would be great as a world building element to have our own language and then maybe use that to give a bit of flavor to the different people that we created for the game, but also as a way for players to have something cool to discover and learn over time. So yeah, sure. So I did create a language actually for this.
Nice.
It was my first opportunity to do it in a professional context, but it wasn't so much. I was still like the lead designer for the core gameplay at that time, so it was more like, hey, on my own time, I would do like a little bit on the side, and we would include it. The game went on to take a completely different direction, as I said, so all of this was dropped. But that gave me like that first experience doing it not as a side project for something that's in my head, but for like, hey, we have like a project, a world that we're building with artists and everything, and how do I, contribute to this? And so that was my first thing. Kurt McClung, the narrative director, after he left Ubisoft, went on to go other places, and he contacted me again a few years later and said, I'm working with this other studio now, and they are creating like a new world and a new universe. It's inspired by old Celtic people and things like this. And we think it would be really great to have our own language, especially because it's a game where you're playing someone who's kind of like a colonizer or a settler, if you want. There's like very strong colonization undertones, and it's part of the message of the game. But you come there, and they wanted for you to experience as a player this clash of, hey, like they are these people that I don't understand, and the way to create this, they thought, hey, if we use like an existing Celtic language, at least some of the players will understand, right? It's like if we were to use like Welsh or Irish, for example, some players will understand this language, and for them, they won't have that experience of like clashing with a people you don't understand, and how do you deal with this? And so that's why they were like, we think a fictional language would really create that experience, but we want to keep the Celtic feel to it. And so he said like, hey, would you be interested in helping build this? And sure, absolutely. I was like, oh, sure. Yes, I love doing that. Let's go. And so we started working on this. Of course, like the team, more on fleshing out that world and especially that the culture of these people. And then I started building a language based on existing Celtic languages, but doing my own thing at the same time, and building it as a way to reflect the culture of these people. Right. So again, it's very world building oriented. In the same way that different languages have a vocabulary that is going to reflect, their own reality and their own like view on the world. If you take the English language, there are things that the English language have like tons of vocabulary to describe in very minute details, and things where you have like, just one or two words, whereas like in the same, to describe the same thing, some languages will have like a dozen words, right? And it just reflects as a language what your culture focus on, and there's a lot of things like this. And so we did that very much. There's this cultural aspect of this world where these people, they only barter. They have no concept of money, right?
Okay.
So it's like their entire society is about bartering, but also they have a very strong relationship with nature, and they see their relationship with nature as a cycle of, I take from nature for sustenance and everything, but I give back by, helping preserve nature and things like this. And their logic of commerce being barter is the same logic. So it's basically there is this cultural trait of the people of uh, thinking of their relationship as a two-way street all the time, right? It's like it's all about cycle, it's about giving and receiving always. And so because of this, I created in the language a word, and that word is ren. Ren means giving and taking, but there's no different words for giving and taking because in
Okay, it's
that
the same
culture,
word.
it's
Okay.
the same thing. In that particular culture, it does not make sense to have two words because it's the same concept, right? It's like if you give, you're going to receive. It's always like the same thing. And it's very interesting because the colonizers that arrived, uh, they come and they take all of the natural resources and they exploit everything, and they even enslave the local people there. So it's for them, it's all about
Taking.
taking without giving back, and that's a concept that's completely foreign to these people. So at the beginning, they even struggle to understand what's going on because it's so foreign to them. And the way they started to refer to these people is using the word renaigse. So it uses ren, which is like the give and
Yeah.
take word, um, and then the ag means someone who does something, right? So it's like it's a giver or taker, right?
Okay.
Give or take, and then the se at the end means towards me.
Okay.
So the way they refer to the colonizers is like the people that take towards them, right? Never
Yeah.
give back, always take towards them. And so once again, it's a reflection of the culture in a word. And then, of course, it's like as you develop the game, you make sure that this word is used in different sentences, that people over time in the dialogues understand the meaning of this word and how it's used. And so now you're having a bunch of characters calling others renaigse and using that word and everything. Uh, but it's not just like a nice foreign word. As you use it more and more and you understand the meaning, you understand a bit, you get a glimpse into the culture of these people, and so it makes it makes a deeper experience, right? As a player, you experience this and you hear that word and you get the meaning of it, and you have all these interesting narrative layers that starts to build
Yeah.
into it. Yeah, so
So
it's a very long way of saying that uh, you're not making a language for the sake of it. Like everything you do for a game, you do it in service of an experience.
yeah, I was about to say that I find this fascinating because I think especially in terms of world building and narrative design, it's not as simple as just writing a story. I think the behavior of your characters need to be consistent. It needs to be grounded on their experiences and their worlds. You're just not writing about the character. You have to think of that character as someone who has consumed, like, let's say, this world around me, but also when something new is coming into this character's life, you are looking at it from a character's point of view. This is something completely new. Their reactions need to be fresh. It cannot be something which they have already had some idea of, because you as a writer would have that idea, right? And
Mhm.
balancing it out could be very interesting, and that's why sometimes the layered writing and layered understanding of subtext and cultures becomes so interesting. Antoine, one last question for you. Let's say you have to give an advice to someone who's at that stage where they are contemplating becoming a lead designer and with goals to become a director someday. Of course, there are a lot of people who have these dreams, and that's great. I find that there are two kinds of people sometimes in this area. The one kind is people who are more in love with the idea of becoming a director or idea of starting a company. but they sometimes don't know all the other things that come with it, like they probably look at it with rose tinted glasses. But then the others who have done their research, who kind of, are understanding what all of this means. Irrespective of that, if you're someone in the industry right now who's been in that senior position for some time, is looking at the next 5 years thinking that, oh, I would like to become a lead, right? What are some things they should do? What are some things they should be learning, at this point of time?
Right. I guess like the number one thing that you should do is tell your manager because then you can work together on, hey, what's a plan to gradually get there? And one thing that's for sure, and actually I've seen people, I've never worked with people that have friends that are like this in the industry that have this strong belief that, hey, if I work hard enough, then I'll get there. The thing is, like, if no one knows this is where you want to go, especially your manager, then how, right? It's like, if you're a very good designer and you work very hard, it's going to look like most likely you want to become a principal designer. If you never say like, oh, actually, I'm interested in leading, I want to go towards the director position, then, so I'd say like the number one thing is just like let your manager know so that you can work together on, what's the way to get there. Second thing is, as I was telling you at the beginning, when you become a lead, you become a people manager. And that's whatever your skill is that works for any type of job, whether you're a designer, whether you're an artist, whatever. When you become a lead, you will become a people manager. That's a different type of skill set. Right? Like you being an excellent designer has nothing to do with your capacity to manage people.
On that, Antoine, sorry to stop you there, but it's something very interesting. A lot of the amazing art directors I've met, absolutely amazing in art direction. They are not the best artists, in the team a lot of times,
Yep.
In fact, a lot of the best artists normally, like the ones I have met at least, they actually sometimes struggle to work with other people. Whereas the best art directors are really people managers who have, of course, been good artists, but maybe in their team, they are artists on a one-on-one comparison who are far better, It's a very interesting point, Anyway, sorry to interrupt you, but it struck me there,
No, but you're right, and these are different skills. So these are skills that you might have, already some of them naturally, but like any skill is something that needs to be learned and worked on. And so I think at the very least, starting to do a bit of reading on this is quite important. The best would be to negotiate with your manager. Is there like an opportunity maybe to get an intern and start by, just managing one intern? The good thing with an intern is that usually it's a lower level of stakes because, of course, you expect an intern to come in and learn and everything. So you're not necessarily going to give an intern like something extremely critical. So as a manager of that person, it's also less pressure on you to just like learn how to manage without like a massive, delivery goal or something like that. So I think it's something, that can be brought up to a manager. Hey, is there an opportunity to get an intern and then for me to manage? That would be a thing. Doing a bit of reading on management also helps with the, getting some of like the key concept and the key skills. And then, like any skill, I think it's important, and that's something that I've seen as well in the past. It's important to understand that you need time to learn. And so, as eager as you are, be careful that you build up your skill. So it's like, if you start and you get one report and then you're like, I can take on more now, I feel like it's okay, give me like, 4 or 5 other reports, it's the same for like, hey, you're just designing like a small mechanic and everything. As much as you dream of it, like your next gig is probably not going to be, I'm now in charge of the entire game, right? It's like, there's probably going to be steps there for you to learn how to get like a bigger, more important mechanic that's more central in the experience, etc., until you have like the the hard skills to manage something bigger. It's the same thing for people management. So I feel like uh, making sure that you're not too eager and you understand that these are skills like any other skills and they need to be trained and you need to learn over time is important. I think it's even more important because when you become a manager, if you're an individual contributor, if you screw it up for yourself and maybe it can impact the team indirectly. But when you're a manager, you being a bad manager is impacting directly your reports, right? If you're a bad manager, then they have a bad manager. Do you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So it's I think it's critical. It's the number one thing that it's understanding that it's a different set of skills and putting in the work and having the mindset of I'm now in learning mode
Yeah.
and I will learn.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I try to see, at least when I was getting into the lead role, and direction, I kind of noticed that organically people started coming to me, and talking to me, and organically, like, you kind of become a go-to person, in different
Yeah.
kind of things, especially in terms of direction. And like what you said, you speak to your manager about it, and they start you with like smaller roles and smaller directions. But I think what's really important is to be able to read the room, and understand how your colleagues see you, how how the different people in the office see you. Do they just see you as a contributor, or do they see you as someone who they can go to and who can step up? Like, there are so many times in our career where something will pop up. Like, I had a situation the first time I became a lead where our director actually left the company, and for 4 months there was no one leading that team, and decisions needed to be made. And I would just go up to the biggest boss and just start talking to him and go like, okay, we are facing this problem, we don't have these many Unity licenses, right? Could you get them for us? And just organically it started becoming like, okay, this person, not that it was my intention, but this person is the one that the team is gravitating towards. I think just being able to read the room is very important, because I think having that EQ on how people perceive you is as important as yeah, anything
You're
else.
absolutely. I'll give you an anecdote there. When I arrived in Singapore, as I said, it was my first experience as a lead.
Yeah.
Right before that, I was a senior designer, and at the same time, it was also like my first experience discovering the culture here. And in the first few months, I was behaving and exactly like I did not have the EQ to read the room and see how people were perceiving me, in a lead role. And so, we were having like these design brainstorms because it was early on in Skull and Bones, and I would like throw ideas in a meeting that I intended as like a brainstorm. So in a brainstorm, you're going to throw an idea. It's probably a bad idea, and that's okay. Actually, it's part of the process. And then we are going to either discard it or bounce on it to do something better and iterate on it. And but so I would throw an idea, and then I, would get back to the designer that was assigned to, continue working on this thing, and then realized that it was basically my bad idea, now like fully documented and everything. And I was like, no, wait, is because I said it and I'm the lead doesn't mean it's the best idea. I meant it
Yeah.
in a way where it's just, I hope that you were going to make something better because I know it's a bad idea. It's just, I throw it as like a way to start the discussion. Uh, and yeah, so what you said, right? I didn't have the EQ to realize that people were perceiving me as, being the lead, someone more senior, thus, like if I said this and all. And so um, I I learned to be more careful about. For some people, it works. For some people, they understand immediately. But having that EQ to read the room and realize that, okay, people are taking this as a task, not as a stupid idea to kickstart the discussion. Let me, redirect this and realize that, okay, this was a bad example. What do you think we could do and engage them for the people that would not realize this? And sometimes have the EQ to realize that, okay, no, they got it. They understand that what I said is stupid and bad, but they understand where I was going with this and they did take it and all. And so you're absolutely right. It's super important.
All right, Antoine. So, all the best with your new studio. I think, it's always a journey. I think the one of the biggest things I've realized in this journey in games and in entertainment is you just always have to be excited about what you're doing, and I think that's the biggest motivator. And going in these journeys, whether it's from, I started a lot like you. I started in mobile games the first 2 years, and I got to work on a lot of different games. This was 2006, and I really felt that accelerated my learning because I was working on different genres, different systems, different styles. Then went into PC, then arcades, education, of course. And yeah, I really look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. And thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.